I used to think my Grandma Aurora was an open book, bound in sunshine and laughter. Her eyes, the color of a summer sky just after a rain shower, always seemed to hold a gentle amusement, a quiet understanding that made you feel instantly safe. She smelled of lavender and old paper, a comforting aroma that permeated her cozy little cottage nestled amongst the whispering pines. Growing up, it was my haven, a place where scraped knees were kissed better, secrets were whispered, and the world outside, with all its sharp edges, seemed to soften. Aurora, even her name sounded like a sunrise, was a constant in my life, a warm hand to hold as I navigated the sometimes turbulent waters of childhood. She taught me how to bake her famous apple pie, the recipe passed down through generations, each bite a taste of home. She told me stories of brave knights and mischievous fairies, her voice a soothing balm that lulled me to sleep on countless summer nights. She was, in my young eyes, simply Grandma, a source of endless love and unwavering support. It wasn't until after she was gone, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 92, that I realized how little I truly knew of the woman who had shaped my life so profoundly. We all knew bits and pieces, of course. Her early life in a small European village, her immigration to America after the war, her quiet strength that saw her through the loss of her husband far too soon. But these were just fragments, glimpses into a life that now, I suspect, held depths I could never have imagined. The cottage, suddenly silent and still, felt like a hollow shell. Sorting through her belongings after the funeral was a heartbreaking task, each object a painful reminder of her absence. My mother, Aunt Clara, and I worked in a quiet, almost reverent manner, carefully packing away her clothes, her photographs, her cherished trinkets. It was a slow, deliberate process, a way of holding onto her just a little longer. It was in the attic, a dusty, forgotten space beneath the eaves, that we found it. Tucked away inside an old wooden chest, beneath a pile of faded quilts and moth-eaten lace, was a diary. Not a fancy, leather-bound journal with gilded edges, but a simple, unassuming notebook, its cover worn and faded, the pages yellowed with age. The leather was soft and cracked, like well-loved skin, and as I lifted it from the chest, a faint scent of vanilla and old ink wafted up, a familiar perfume that instantly transported me back to Aurora's warm embrace. My heart skipped a beat. I knew instantly that this was something different, something significant. Grandma Aurora wasn't one for writing things down. She was a woman of action, of quiet strength, of living in the moment. The idea of her pouring her thoughts and feelings onto paper seemed almost foreign. The diary felt heavy in my hands, heavier than its size would suggest. It was as if it held not just words, but the weight of years, of secrets, of a life lived fully, deeply, and perhaps secretly. My mother and aunt watched with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation as I carefully opened the diary. The first page was dated 1942. The ink was faded, almost brown, but the handwriting was elegant and precise, a stark contrast to the simple notebook. My dearest love, the first entry began. The world is on fire, and our little village trembles in its shadow. But even in the darkness, your love is a beacon, a promise of a brighter future. I pray that this war will end soon, so that we can finally be together, free from fear and uncertainty. I stopped reading, my breath catching in my throat. My dearest love? Grandma Aurora had never spoken of a love before my grandfather. She had always portrayed their meeting as a chance encounter, a simple twist of fate. I glanced at my mother and aunt, their faces etched with surprise. Aunt Clara reached out and gently took the diary from my hands, her fingers tracing the faded ink. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. As I continued to flip through the pages, I discovered a story far more complex and compelling than anything I could have imagined. A story of forbidden love, of wartime sacrifice, of impossible choices made in the face of unimaginable adversity. A story that painted a picture of Grandma Aurora that was both familiar and utterly new. The diary revealed a young woman named Aurora, living in a small European village under Nazi occupation. She was in love with a man named Stefan, a member of the resistance, who risked his life every day to fight for freedom. Their love was a dangerous secret, a spark of hope in a world consumed by darkness. The diary entries detailed their secret meetings, their whispered promises, their shared dreams of a future that seemed increasingly uncertain. They spoke of their fears, their hopes, their unwavering belief in the power of love to overcome even the darkest of times. But the diary also revealed a terrible secret, a sacrifice Aurora made to protect Stefan and his comrades, a choice that would forever alter the course of her life. A choice that forced her to leave her home, her family, and the man she loved, to start a new life in a new country, carrying the weight of her past with her. The more I read, the more I realized that the Grandma Aurora I thought I knew was just the surface, a carefully constructed facade that hid a lifetime of secrets and sacrifices. She had carried this burden alone for so long, never revealing the truth to anyone, not even her own children. The revelation was overwhelming, a tidal wave of emotions that threatened to drown me. I felt a profound sense of sadness for the young Aurora, forced to make such impossible choices. I felt anger at the circumstances that had robbed her of her happiness. But most of all, I felt an overwhelming sense of respect and admiration for her strength, her courage, and her unwavering love. The diary was more than just a collection of words on paper. It was a window into her soul, a glimpse into the heart of a woman who had lived a life far more extraordinary than anyone had ever known. It was a legacy, a testament to the enduring power of love, sacrifice, and the human spirit. The silence in the attic was deafening, broken only by the rustling of the pages as my mother and aunt took turns reading the diary. We were all lost in the story, transported back in time to a world of war, love, and sacrifice. When we finally emerged from the attic, hours later, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. We were all exhausted, emotionally drained, but also strangely invigorated. We had discovered a secret, a hidden truth that had the power to change everything we thought we knew about our family. My mother turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. "I can't believe she never told us," she said, her voice trembling. "All these years, she carried this secret alone." I nodded, unable to speak. I understood now why Aurora had always been so quiet, so reserved, so seemingly content with her simple life. She had found peace in her memories, in the knowledge that she had done what she had to do, that she had protected the ones she loved. The diary was more than just a story. It was a key that unlocked a hidden part of our family history. It was a treasure, a gift from Grandma Aurora that would forever change the way we saw her and ourselves. As I held the diary close to my chest, I made a promise to myself. I would share Aurora's story with the world. I would tell her story of love, loss, and sacrifice so that her memory would live on, not just in our hearts, but in the hearts of others. It wouldn't be easy. The story was complex, filled with pain and heartbreak. But I knew that it was a story that needed to be told, a story that deserved to be heard. And so, here I am, ready to embark on this journey, to unravel the secrets of Grandma Aurora's hidden diary, and to share her extraordinary story with you. If you'd like to walk this path with me, to discover the truth about the woman who shaped my life, to understand the enduring power of love and sacrifice, then subscribe and stay close, for the story I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew. The scent of lavender still clung faintly to the pages, a ghostly echo of the sachets Aurora always kept tucked in her drawers. It brought back Willow Creek so vividly, I could almost feel the sun-baked dust between my toes and hear the drowsy drone of bees in the clover fields. Willow Creek wasn't much, just a scattering of houses nestled between rolling hills, a general store run by old Mr. Abernathy, who always smelled of pipe tobacco and licorice, and a one-room schoolhouse where Miss Amelia tried her best to instill a love of learning in a room full of restless children. The war in Europe was a distant rumble, barely audible in the quiet rhythm of our days. Life revolved around the seasons, the planting and the harvest, the long, sun-drenched summers and the crisp, snow-covered winters. We lived on a farm just outside of town, a place that felt both boundless and intimately familiar. The farmhouse, with its wide porch and climbing roses, had been in my family for generations. My parents, sturdy and hardworking, were the heart of our little world. Papa, with his calloused hands and quiet strength, coaxed life from the earth. Mama, a woman of gentle grace and unwavering spirit, filled our home with warmth and laughter. I was Aurora, the middle child, caught between the boundless enthusiasm of my older brother, Thomas, and the quiet, poetic soul of my younger sister, Lily. Thomas, with his head always in the clouds, dreamed of flying. He spent hours building model airplanes from balsa wood, his eyes shining with a fervent passion that both thrilled and worried Mama. Lily, on the other hand, found solace in the written word. She filled notebooks with poems and stories, her imagination a vibrant landscape where anything was possible. I was different. I loved the farm, the feel of the earth beneath my bare feet, the taste of Mama's apple pie, the sound of Papa's laughter. But there was a part of me that yearned for something more, something I couldn't quite name. I would sit for hours beneath the old oak tree in the pasture, lost in the pages of books borrowed from the traveling library that visited Willow Creek once a month. I devoured stories of faraway lands, of bustling cities, and daring adventures. They filled me with a longing that tugged at my heart, a sense that there was a whole world waiting to be discovered beyond the familiar hills of Willow Creek. Our days followed a predictable rhythm. We woke with the sun, the aroma of Mama's coffee and bacon filling the air. After a hearty breakfast, we would head out to the fields, helping Papa with the chores. Thomas, despite his dreams of flight, never shied away from hard work. He was strong and capable, always willing to lend a hand. Lily, though less suited to physical labor, would often join us, her presence a quiet comfort. She'd collect wildflowers, weaving them into crowns and leaving them on fence posts as little gifts for the birds. Evenings were spent on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. Papa would tell stories of his own childhood, of the hardships his family had faced, and the resilience that had carried them through. Mama would hum softly as she mended clothes, her needle flashing in the fading light. Thomas would point out constellations, sharing his knowledge of the stars and planets. Lily and I would listen, our imaginations soaring with each tale. Sometimes, after everyone else was asleep, I would sneak out to the barn. The scent of hay and horses filled the air, a comforting and familiar aroma. I would climb up to the hayloft, where I could see the stars twinkling like diamonds scattered across a velvet cloth. I'd lie there for hours lost in thought, wondering about the vastness of the universe and my place within it. I knew deep down that Willow Creek couldn't hold me forever. It wasn't a dissatisfaction, not really. It was more like a quiet awareness, a sense that my path lay elsewhere. I imagined myself traveling to distant lands, meeting new people, experiencing things I couldn't even begin to imagine. It wasn't that I didn't love my family or my home. It was simply that I needed to explore, to discover what lay beyond the horizon. This feeling, this quiet yearning, was something I kept mostly to myself. Thomas was so focused on his dreams of flying, and Lily was so content in her world of words. I didn't want to burden them with my restlessness. Besides, I wasn't even sure how to explain it. It was just a feeling, a whisper in my heart that told me there was more to life than what I could see from the top of the old oak tree. One evening, as we sat on the porch, a traveling salesman stopped by. He was a wiry man with a weathered face and a twinkle in his eye. He carried a suitcase filled with trinkets and gadgets, things we had never seen before. He showed us a kaleidoscope, a small hand-cranked phonograph, and a set of brightly colored postcards depicting scenes from around the world. I was mesmerized. The postcards, in particular, captivated me. They showed images of bustling cities, towering mountains, and exotic landscapes. I could almost smell the spices in the Moroccan marketplace, feel the cool spray of the ocean in Hawaii, hear the echoing chants of monks in Tibet. After the salesman left, I couldn't stop thinking about those postcards. They were like windows into another world, a world that seemed so much more vibrant and exciting than my own. I knew, in that moment, that I had to see those places for myself. I didn't know how or when, but I knew that one day I would leave Willow Creek and embark on my own adventure. The seed was planted, a tiny spark of longing that would eventually blossom into a burning desire. It was a secret I carried within me, a silent promise to myself that I would not let my life be confined to the familiar boundaries of Willow Creek. I would honor my family, cherish my home, but I would also follow my heart, wherever it might lead. Looking back now, I can see how that quiet yearning shaped the course of my life. It was the catalyst for everything that followed, the driving force behind the choices I made, the risks I took. It was a part of me, as integral as my love for my family and my connection to the land. And even now, as I sit here surrounded by the memories of a life well lived, I can still feel that spark, that quiet whisper that reminds me that the world is full of endless possibilities, waiting to be discovered. The world I would soon be thrown into, a world changed forever. But those were times yet to come, and Willow Creek, in its tranquility, was a haven I would soon long to return to. The scent of lavender, a constant companion, reminded me that even in the face of hardship, the beauty of simple things could endure, a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit. Here's the next part of my story. The summer of '39 held a deceptive sweetness. The scent of honeysuckle clung to the air, heavy and intoxicating, as if trying to mask the metallic tang of fear that was slowly seeping into Willow Creek. The lazy drone of bees in the lavender fields still lulled you into a sense of timeless peace, but the radio, once a source of comforting music and folksy tales, now crackled with news from across the ocean, news that spoke of shadows gathering, of borders shifting, of a storm brewing that threatened to engulf the whole world. It started subtly. Whispers at the general store, hushed conversations behind cupped hands. Letters arriving from distant cousins who'd emigrated to Europe years ago, filled with a disquiet that bled through the cheerful stationery. My parents, bless their hearts, tried to shield us. Papa would turn the radio down when the news came on. Mama would hum louder as she kneaded bread, filling the kitchen with the comforting aroma of yeast and warmth, as if she could bake away the encroaching darkness. But you couldn't ignore it. Not really. Thomas, ever eager for adventure, would sit glued to the radio, his eyes shining with a kind of reckless excitement. He saw opportunity in the gathering storm, a chance to prove himself to be a hero. "Imagine Aurora," he'd say, puffing out his chest, fighting for freedom, for what's right. Mama would clutch her apron, her face etched with worry. "Freedom comes at a terrible price, Thomas," she'd say softly, her voice trembling. "A price no one should have to pay." Papa, usually so steady and calm, grew quieter, his brow furrowed with concern. He'd spend hours in the fields, his shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the horizon as if he could see the storm clouds gathering there. He worried about the farm, about providing for us, about the future he'd always envisioned for his children. The land, his livelihood, his legacy, all felt suddenly vulnerable. And me? I felt adrift. The romantic dreams that had filled my head just months before seemed suddenly frivolous, childish. The world was changing, and I was changing with it. The carefree girl who'd chased fireflies in the twilight now felt the weight of something heavy settling in her heart, a sense of unease, a vague feeling of guilt that I could still laugh and dream when others were facing such hardship. I started paying closer attention to the news, reading the newspapers with a newfound urgency, trying to understand the forces that were pulling the world apart. I questioned everything, things I'd always taken for granted: justice, safety, the inherent goodness of humanity. It was a rude awakening, a shedding of innocence that left me feeling raw and exposed. Then he arrived. It was late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the dusty road that led into Willow Creek. I was sitting on the porch swing, trying to lose myself in a book, but the words swam before my eyes. I kept thinking about the refugees in Europe, the children orphaned by war, the families torn apart. A dust cloud announced his approach. A lone figure, walking slowly, his uniform a faded olive green, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He wasn't from Willow Creek. We knew everyone here, every face, every story. This man was different. He stopped at the edge of our property, His eyes, the color of the summer sky after a storm, fixed on me. There was a weariness in them, a depth that belied his youth. He couldn't have been much older than Thomas, maybe 20 or 21, but he carried himself with a gravity that made him seem older. He stood tall, his shoulders squared, but there was a vulnerability in his posture, a hint of uncertainty that tugged at my heart. He didn't smile, didn't offer a greeting, just stood there, his gaze unwavering. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated for a moment, as if weighing his words. "I'm looking for work," he said finally, his voice low and gravelly, with a hint of an accent I couldn't quite place. "I heard there might be opportunities on farms around here." Papa had told us that the government was encouraging farmers to increase production to help support the war effort. Farmhands were becoming scarce as young men like Thomas were drawn to the allure of military service. "We could use the help," I said, surprised by the firmness of my voice. "Papa's out in the fields. I can take you to him." He nodded, a slight inclination of his head. "Thank you." As I led him towards the fields, I couldn't help but steal glances at him. He moved with a quiet grace, his boots kicking up small puffs of dust. He didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just followed me, his presence radiating a strange mixture of strength and vulnerability. He was different from the boys I knew. Thomas and his friends were boisterous, full of laughter and swagger. They talked about cars and girls and sports, their lives revolving around the small world of Willow Creek. This man, he seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. His eyes held a knowledge and understanding of things I couldn't even imagine. When we reached the fields, Papa was inspecting the corn crop, his face etched with worry. He looked up as we approached, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Papa, this is—" "I didn't catch your name," I said, turning to the young man. "Elias," he said simply, extending his hand to Papa. "Elias Nowak." Papa shook his hand, his grip firm but cautious. "Thomas Miller," he said. "You looking for work, son?" Elias nodded. "I'm a hard worker," he said. "I'm not afraid of long hours." Papa studied him for a moment, his gaze assessing. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He needed help, desperately. But there was something about Elias, something unsettling, that made him hesitate. "All right," Papa said finally. "I can give you a try. We'll pay you the going rate, room and board included. You can start tomorrow." Elias nodded again, a flicker of something, gratitude, perhaps, in his eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Miller." That evening, as we sat down to dinner, the atmosphere was charged with a strange energy. Elias sat quietly, eating his food with a polite reserve. He didn't offer any information about himself, didn't talk about his past, his family, his reasons for being in Willow Creek. He was a mystery, a cipher, and I found myself drawn to him in a way I couldn't explain. Thomas, of course, was suspicious. He peppered Elias with questions, trying to pry information out of him. Where was he from? What had he done before? Why wasn't he fighting for his country? Elias answered politely, but vaguely, revealing nothing of substance. He said he was from a small town in Pennsylvania, that he'd worked on a farm his whole life, that he had reasons for not enlisting. Thomas didn't believe him. I could see the doubt in his eyes, the suspicion that Elias was hiding something. And I suspected he was right. There was something about Elias, a shadow in his eyes, a guardedness in his demeanor, that suggested he was carrying a secret. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about him. His quiet strength, his haunted eyes, the way he seemed to be watching everything, observing, analyzing. Who was he? What was he doing in Willow Creek? And why did his presence make me feel so uneasy? I knew deep down that Elias's arrival marked a turning point. The world was changing, and so was I. The innocent dreams of my youth were fading, replaced by a growing awareness of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of things. And I had a feeling that Elias was somehow connected to that darkness, that his presence would soon entwine my life with peril, romance, and choices no one my age should have to make. That night, I dreamt of storms, of raging winds and crashing waves, of a world consumed by fire. And in the heart of the storm, I saw Elias, his eyes burning with a fierce intensity, reaching out to me, his hand outstretched. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my life would never be the same again. The honeysuckle sweetness of that summer was beginning to rot, replaced by the bitter taste of reality. The war wasn't just a distant rumble anymore. It had arrived in Willow Creek, in the form of a young man with haunted eyes and a secret past. And my heart, once filled with innocent dreams, was now filled with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and a strange, undeniable attraction. The storm was coming, and I knew, somehow, that I was about to be swept away. The scent of wood smoke still clung to my clothes, a ghost of the bonfire where we'd burned the Nazi propaganda. The flames had died down, but a different kind of fire had been ignited within me. The kids, bless their hearts, thought they were protecting Grandpa by confiscating his phone. They couldn't possibly understand the stirrings in my heart, the way Elias looked at me, like I held a secret he'd been searching for his whole life. That night, sleep evaded me. I tossed and turned, the image of Elias's kind eyes warring with the fear that gnawed at my insides. Willow Creek, once a haven of peace, was now a stage for a silent drama, and we were all players, whether we knew it or not. I crept downstairs, drawn to the familiar comfort of my diary. The worn leather felt cool beneath my fingertips as I opened it and began to write, the scratch of the pen the only sound in the sleeping house. May 14th, 1940, *, the air is thick with unease. The children sing their innocent songs, but the melodies seem to tremble on the breeze, carrying a hint of something darker. Elias, he is a puzzle. His eyes hold a sadness that mirrors my own, a loneliness that I understand all too well. But there's also a strength, a quiet determination that draws me to him like a moth to a flickering flame. I find myself longing for his company, for the solace of his presence in this increasingly frightening world. I met him by the creek this evening. We talked for hours, or perhaps it only felt like hours. Time seems to lose its meaning when I'm with him. He told me about his life before the war, about his love for science, for the intricate workings of the universe. He spoke with such passion, such hope, that it was easy to forget the darkness that surrounds us. But then he grew quiet, a shadow passing over his face. He said he had something to tell me, something important, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. I pressed him gently, but he only shook his head, his eyes filled with a pain I couldn't comprehend. ***, I fear for him. I fear for all of us. ***, the next few days were a dance of stolen moments and whispered conversations. Elias and I met in secret, always aware of the eyes that might be watching. We walked along the creek, the water a constant, murmuring witness to our burgeoning love. He told me stories of his childhood, of his dreams for the future, and I, in turn, shared my own hopes and fears. We found solace in each other's company, a refuge from the storm raging around us. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Elias finally revealed his secret. We were sitting on a fallen log, the air cool and crisp against our skin. He took my hand, his touch sending a shiver down my spine. "Aurora," he began, his voice low and strained, "I haven't been entirely honest with you." My heart pounded in my chest. I knew, somehow, that what he was about to say would change everything. He told me he wasn't just a traveler passing through. He was a scientist, a German scientist who had deserted his post. He had been working on a top-secret project, a project involving a powerful encryption device, an artifact capable of sending coded messages that were virtually unbreakable. He called it the Key. The Nazis wanted it, needed it, to secure their communication lines and ensure their victory. But Elias couldn't stand by and watch as this technology was used for evil. He had sabotaged the project, stolen the artifact, and fled, determined to keep it out of Nazi hands. He knew they would be after him, that his life was in constant danger. That was why he was hiding in Willow Creek, hoping to disappear, to protect the artifact and prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. "I'm a traitor to my country," he said, his voice laced with anguish. "I'm a danger to you and your family. I looked into his eyes, saw the pain and the desperation, and knew that he was telling the truth. He wasn't a monster, a Nazi sympathizer. He was a man of conscience, a man who had risked everything for what he believed in. "You're not a danger to me," I said, squeezing his hand. "You're a good man, Elias. A brave man." He looked at me, his eyes filled with gratitude. "But what if they find me? What if they find the artifact?" "Then we'll protect it," I said, my voice filled with a newfound resolve. Together. That night, the shadows seemed to lengthen, to press in on us with a newfound intensity. I noticed things I hadn't seen before. A strange car parked on the edge of town, men in unfamiliar clothes lingering near the general store, their eyes scanning the streets with a cold, calculating gaze. The air crackled with suspicion, with the unspoken fear that we were being watched. I knew then that Elias was right. They were here. The Nazis had found us. Back at the house, I couldn't sleep. I returned to my diary, pouring out my fears and my hopes, my growing love for Elias, and my unwavering determination to protect him. May 18th, 1940, *, the wolves are at the door. I see them in the faces of strangers, in the hushed whispers of the townspeople, in the way the shadows seem to cling to the corners of my vision. Elias is right. They're here, searching for him, searching for the artifact. I feel a responsibility to protect him, a fierce, protective instinct that I never knew I possessed. But I also fear for my family, for my children, for the innocent lives that could be caught in the crossfire. What am I to do? How can I protect them all? I asked Elias if he knew where he could hide the artifact. He told me his mentor, a clockmaker, had left him clues, a riddle of sorts, hinting at a hiding place. The clockmaker had been a part of a secret resistance during the First War. The clues pointed to the old church, to a hidden labyrinth beneath its foundations. A labyrinth built to protect something of great value. ***, I am terrified, but I am also strangely exhilarated. I am no longer just a bystander, a witness to the events unfolding around me. I am a participant, a player in this dangerous game. And I will do whatever it takes to protect the man I love and to safeguard the future of my family. ***, the next day, Elias and I ventured to the old church. The building stood on a small hill overlooking Willow Creek, its weathered stone walls a testament to its long and storied history. The air inside was cool and damp, heavy with the scent of dust and incense. We walked through the empty pews, our footsteps echoing in the silence, until we reached the altar. Elias began to examine the intricate carvings on the altar, his fingers tracing the lines and curves. He muttered to himself, deciphering the clues left by his mentor. I watched him, my heart pounding in my chest, wondering what we would find. Finally, he stopped, his eyes wide with realization. "Here," he said, pointing to a small, almost invisible inscription on the base of the altar. "Where time stands still, the path is revealed." He pressed on the inscription, and a section of the altar slid open, revealing a narrow passage leading down into darkness. We exchanged a nervous glance, then Elias lit a small torch and stepped into the passage. I followed close behind, my hand clutching his. The passage led us down a winding staircase, deeper and deeper into the earth. The air grew colder and damper, and the silence was broken only by the sound of our footsteps and the occasional drip of water. Finally, we reached the bottom of the staircase and stepped into a vast, labyrinthine chamber. The walls were lined with shelves filled with ancient books, forgotten artifacts, and strange, unidentifiable objects. The air was thick with the scent of decay and the weight of centuries. We walked through the labyrinth, our eyes scanning the shelves, searching for the hiding place. The clues were cryptic, riddles wrapped in riddles, but Elias, with his sharp mind and his knowledge of his mentor's work, was able to decipher them one by one. After what felt like hours, we reached a dead end. Elias examined the wall, running his hands over the cold, damp stone. He pressed on a loose brick, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a small, hidden alcove. Inside the alcove, nestled on a velvet cushion, was a small, intricately crafted box. It was made of polished wood, inlaid with silver and gold, and adorned with strange symbols. This was it. The artifact. The key. As Elias reached for the box, a voice echoed through the labyrinth. "Don't move." We turned to see two men standing at the entrance to the alcove, their faces hidden in shadow. They were dressed in civilian clothes, but their eyes were cold and hard, their hands gripping the pistols at their sides. "We've been expecting you," Herr Schmidt, one of the men said, his voice dripping with menace. "Hand over the artifact, and we might let you live." Elias looked at me, his eyes filled with fear and desperation. I knew what I had to do. I stepped in front of him, shielding him with my body. "You'll have to go through me," I said, my voice trembling but firm. The men laughed, a harsh, chilling sound that echoed through the labyrinth. "So be it," one of them said, raising his pistol. But before he could fire, I reached into my pocket, pulled out the small derringer I had been carrying, and fired. The air in the hidden chamber hung thick and cold, tasting of damp stone and something else, something metallic, like old blood. Elias's lamp cast dancing shadows that played tricks on my eyes, making the dust motes swirling in the beam look like tiny, frantic spirits. We had finally found it. After weeks of deciphering cryptic clues, tracing forgotten maps, and navigating the treacherous web of Nazi occupation, we were here. The chamber was smaller than I had imagined, barely larger than a generous parlor. The walls were lined with shelves, mostly empty, though a few held rusted tools and fragments of clockwork mechanisms. In the center of the room, resting on a simple wooden pedestal, was the artifact. It wasn't what I expected. No gleaming gold or ornate carvings. It was a small, unassuming box, crafted from dark wood, almost black, with intricate silver filigree tracing patterns across its surface. The filigree seemed to writhe in the lamplight, like living vines. Elias approached it slowly, his breath clouding in the frigid air. He reached out a hand, hesitated, then gently lifted the box. He held it reverently, as if it were a newborn child. "It's lighter than I thought," he murmured, his voice hushed with awe. Years he spent perfecting this. My mentor, the clockmaker. He believed it could change everything. He began to examine the box, his fingers tracing the delicate silverwork. Suddenly, a sharp click echoed through the chamber. We both froze. Another click, followed by a grinding sound from somewhere deep within the walls. "Traps," I whispered, my heart pounding against my ribs. He wouldn't have left it unguarded. Elias nodded, his eyes darting around the room. "Clever traps, I'm sure." He was a master of mechanics. He began to work at the filigree, his fingers nimble and precise. He muttered to himself, reciting fragments of the clockmaker's teachings, his voice a low, hurried hum. I watched him, my anxiety growing with each passing second. Then a different sound cut through the air, the unmistakable sound of boots on stone, growing closer. The low rumble of voices, harsh and guttural, followed. "They're here," I breathed, fear constricting my throat. Elias's head snapped up. His face was grim. "They must have been following us. We don't have much time." He shoved the box into my hands. "Aurora, you need to hide it. There's a passage behind the bookshelf on the east wall. I saw it on the plans. Go. I'll hold them off." "No, Elias, we go together." I protested, clutching the box tightly. "There's no time to argue," he snapped, his voice sharp with urgency. "I know this place better than you. Just go. Hide it. And promise me, Aurora, promise me you'll keep it safe. No matter what." His eyes, usually so warm and gentle, were now filled with a steely resolve. I saw the truth in them. He wasn't just trying to protect me, he was giving me a purpose. A reason to survive. I hesitated for a moment longer, then nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "I promise," I whispered. He gave me a fleeting smile, a sad, tender smile that I would carry with me for the rest of my days. "Go, Aurora. Go now." I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing on the stone floor. I found the bookshelf he had mentioned and pushed against it. It swung inward, revealing a narrow passage leading into darkness. I squeezed through, the box digging into my side. As I stumbled down the passage, I heard the sounds of fighting erupt behind me. Shouts, curses, the clang of metal against metal. I didn't dare look back. I knew what was happening. Elias was buying me time, sacrificing himself to protect the artifact. The passage twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the earth. The air grew colder and damper, and the darkness pressed in around me. I could hear my own ragged breathing, the pounding of my heart. I tripped and stumbled, scraping my hands and knees on the rough stone. But I kept running, driven by fear and a growing sense of responsibility. Finally, the passage opened into a small, hidden alcove. It was nothing more than a niche in the wall, barely large enough for me to stand in. I huddled there, trembling, listening to the sounds of the battle raging behind me. Then silence. A silence so profound, so absolute, that it was almost more terrifying than the fighting. I held my breath, waiting, listening. But there was nothing. Only the echo of my own heartbeat. After what felt like an eternity, I slowly crept back to the entrance of the passage. I peered out cautiously. The chamber was empty. The lamp had been knocked over, and the floor was littered with debris. A single, dark stain spread across the stone, soaking into the dust. Elias was gone. I sank to my knees, the box slipping from my numb fingers. A sob tore through me, a raw, animal sound of grief and despair. He was gone. My Elias. My love. My protector. Gone. I stayed there for a long time, lost in my sorrow. The world seemed to shrink around me, collapsing under the weight of my loss. The chamber, which had moments before held such promise, now felt like a tomb. But as the first rays of dawn began to filter through the cracks in the walls, something shifted within me. A small spark of defiance ignited in the darkness of my grief. Elias had entrusted me with something important. He had given his life to protect it. I couldn't let his sacrifice be in vain. I picked up the box, cradling it in my hands. It felt heavier now, not in weight, but in significance. It was more than just a box. It was a symbol of hope, a testament to courage, of a legacy of love. I knew then that my life would never be the same. The carefree days of my youth were over. I was no longer just Aurora, the baker's daughter. I was Aurora, the keeper of the artifact. I was Aurora, the protector of Elias's memory. I left the chamber that morning, a changed woman. My heart was broken, but my spirit was unbroken. I carried the box with me, hidden beneath my clothes, a constant reminder of my promise. I started writing in this diary shortly after that day. I needed to make sense of everything, to process my grief, to record the events that had led me to this moment. It became my confidant, my therapist, my link to the past. It was where I could talk to Elias, where I could tell him about my fears and my hopes, where I could keep his memory alive. I knew that the journey ahead would be long and dangerous. The Nazis would be searching for me, for the artifact. But I was no longer afraid. I had a purpose. I had a mission. And I had Elias's love to guide me. The weight of it all settled on my shoulders, heavy and undeniable. It was a burden, yes, but it was also a gift. A gift of purpose, of resilience, of the knowledge that, even in the darkest of times, love can endure. And sometimes, love demands sacrifice. And sometimes, sacrifice becomes legacy. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do, leaving him there. Leaving a piece of my heart buried beneath that old church. But I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I had to keep going. For Elias. For the future. For the hope that one day, this war would end, and the world would be free again. And this little box, this seemingly insignificant object, might just hold the key to making that happen. The labyrinth spat me out like a bad dream. One moment, the cold stone pressed against my cheek, the echo of Elias's last words still ringing in my ears. The next, I was blinking against the weak morning light, sprawling on the overgrown grass at the edge of the woods. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. But I was out. I stumbled the rest of the way home, each step of victory purchased with his life. The house loomed ahead, ordinary and oblivious. How could the world look the same when everything inside me was fractured? I slipped in through the back door, the familiar squeak of the hinges a discordant note in the symphony of grief that had begun to swell inside me. I went straight to my room, avoiding the kitchen, the living room, any place where I might encounter another human being. The artifact felt like a lead weight against my skin, nestled under my shirt. I pulled it out, the cool metal a stark contrast to the clammy heat of my hand. It sat on my palm, inert, silent. Had Elias known what it would cost? Had he understood the price of secrets? I hid it at the bottom of my dresser, beneath a pile of old sweaters, as if its power could be muffled by wool. Then I stripped off my clothes, the lingering scent of damp earth and something acrid, something like fear, clinging to the fabric. I couldn't face the mirror. Not yet. Not with the truth etched on my face, the truth that Elias was gone, and I was the one who had brought him there. I showered, scrubbing my skin raw, trying to wash away the labyrinth, the loss, the memory of his sacrifice. But the water just swirled red down the drain, a mocking reminder. I dressed in the softest clothes I could find, a worn cotton dress that smelled faintly of lavender. I needed comfort, a shield against the world. But there was no comfort to be found, not anymore. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Usually, by this time, the grandkids would be clamoring for breakfast, their laughter echoing through the halls. But today, only silence answered me. A heavy, suffocating silence that pressed down on my chest, stealing my breath. I found the diary tucked away in its usual spot, nestled between the photo albums on the bookshelf. It felt heavier than I remembered, pregnant with unspoken words. I carried it to the rocking chair by the window, the same chair where Elias used to sit and read, his brow furrowed in concentration. I opened the diary, the familiar scent of old paper and ink filling my nostrils. The last entry was in his hand, a hurried scrawl about the labyrinth, about the artifact, about the need to protect it at all costs. He had known. He had known it would come to this. Tears blurred the words. I traced his handwriting with my finger, trying to recapture the warmth of his presence, the sound of his voice. But he was gone. And all that remained were these fragile words, a testament to a life cut short. I picked up my pen, the weight of it strangely comforting in my hand. What could I write? What words could possibly capture the immensity of my loss? I wrote the date. Then I simply wrote his name. Elias. Over and over again until the page was filled with it. A desperate attempt to hold on to him, to keep him alive in my memory. The official story was simple, sanitized. Elias had died in an accident. A fall. A tragic mishap. It was easier that way, easier for everyone to understand. Easier than explaining the labyrinth, the artifact, the ancient forces at play. My children, my grandchildren, they saw my grief, of course. They saw the tears, the haunted look in my eyes. They offered condolences, hugs, words of comfort. But they didn't see the truth. They couldn't. How could I tell them that their father, their grandfather, had died protecting a secret that had been passed down through generations? How could I explain the weight that now rested on my shoulders, the responsibility to carry on his work, to protect the artifact from those who would seek to misuse it? I became adept at deception. I smiled when I wanted to scream. I nodded when I wanted to argue. I swallowed my rage and my grief and presented a calm, composed facade to the world. But inside, I was crumbling. The silence of the house became a constant torment, filled with the echoes of his laughter, the ghost of his touch. I found myself avoiding conversations, retreating into the solitude of my own thoughts. The artifact remained hidden, a constant reminder of my burden. I felt its presence, a subtle hum beneath the floorboards, a shadow in the corner of my eye. It was a responsibility I hadn't asked for, a destiny I didn't want. But Elias was gone, and I was the only one left who knew the truth. I had to protect it. For him. One night, unable to sleep, I crept into Elias's study. It was just as he had left it, cluttered with books and papers, maps and charts. The air hung thick with the scent of old paper and pipe tobacco, a ghost of his presence lingering in the room. I ran my hand across his desk, the smooth surface worn smooth by years of use. My fingers brushed against a stack of notebooks, their covers filled with his meticulous handwriting. I hesitated. These were his private thoughts, his personal reflections. Did I have the right to invade his privacy even now? But then I remembered his last words, the urgency in his voice, the plea in his eyes. I had to know. I had to understand. I opened the first notebook, my heart pounding in my chest. The pages were filled with his research, his theories, his doubts. He had been searching for something hidden within the labyrinth, something connected to the artifact. I spent hours poring over his notes, my eyes burning with fatigue. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. He believed that the artifact was not just a relic of the past, but a key to the future. A key to unlocking a power that could either save the world or destroy it. And now, that key was in my hands. I closed the notebook, my mind reeling. I was just an old woman, grieving the loss of her brother. What did I know about saving the world? But then I looked at the artifact, hidden beneath my sweaters, and I knew that I couldn't turn away. I had to do this. For Elias. For the future. I started small. I visited the local library, spending hours in the dusty archives, researching ancient civilizations, forgotten languages, esoteric symbols. I devoured books on mythology, folklore, and the occult. I felt like a fraud, an imposter in a world of scholars and experts. But I persevered, driven by a force I didn't fully understand. A force born of grief, of love, of a desperate need to honor Elias's memory. I was still grieving. The pain was still raw, the silence still deafening. But amidst the heartbreak, something new was beginning to take shape. A flicker of resolve, a spark of purpose. I was no longer just Aurora. I was the protector of the artifact, the keeper of the secret. And I would not fail. The silence in Willow Creek after Elias, after everything, it wasn't peaceful. It was a suffocating kind of quiet, the kind that screams accusations at you even when no one is speaking. It was a silence that echoed with his absence, with the laughter that would never again fill our little cottage, with the gentle hum of his tinkering that would no longer vibrate through the floorboards. I couldn't stay. Not if I wanted to keep him alive, even just in memory. Not if I wanted to keep the promise I made him, the promise to protect what he had entrusted to me. So I left. I packed a small bag, mostly Elias's things, his worn leather diary, his notes scribbled on scraps of paper, the peculiar artifact that felt both alien and intimately familiar in my hand. I left behind the familiar comfort of Willow Creek, the only home I'd ever truly known, for the anonymity of the city. A city whose name I won't speak even now, so many years later. It was a place where I could disappear, become just another face in the crowd, just another woman trying to make her way in a world consumed by war. My new home was a small, cramped apartment above a bakery. The smell of yeast and sugar was a constant comfort, a small reminder of normalcy in a world gone mad. The sounds of the city, the rumble of trams, the shouts of vendors, the distant sirens, were a constant reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond my door. It was a far cry from the quiet serenity of Willow Creek, but it was safe, or at least safer. The first few weeks were a blur of settling in, finding work as a seamstress, and trying to decipher Elias's notes. The diary was my lifeline, a connection to him that transcended the physical world. His handwriting, spidery and precise, filled the pages with scientific jargon, encrypted messages, and cryptic diagrams. He had always been a man of secrets, Elias, but I never realized just how many he held until I was left to unravel them alone. I spent hours in the city's grand library, a cavernous space filled with the scent of old paper and the hushed whispers of scholars. I devoured books on cryptography, mathematics, and history, anything that might shed light on the artifact and Elias's work. I felt like a child again, struggling to understand concepts that were far beyond my grasp. I was, after all, just a simple woman from a small town. But Elias had believed in me, and I refused to let him down. The artifact itself was a marvel. It was small, no bigger than my palm, made of a dark, unknown metal that felt strangely warm to the touch. It was covered in intricate symbols that seemed to shift and change depending on the light. At first, I thought it was simply a sophisticated encryption device, a way for Elias to communicate securely with his contacts. But as I delved deeper into his notes, I realized it was so much more. It was a key to unlocking secrets that could change the course of the war. It was a potent intelligence tool, capable of deciphering enemy codes, predicting their movements, and exposing their plans. Elias had called it the Oracle, and I was beginning to understand why. The library wasn't enough, though. I needed more specialized knowledge, the kind you couldn't find in books. So, I sought out discreet consultations with experts, mathematicians, linguists, even a retired codebreaker who lived in a dusty little shop on the edge of town. I used the small amount of money Elias had left me and what I earned from my sewing to pay for their time, carefully concealing my true purpose. I told them I was researching a family history project, a complex puzzle that required their unique skills. They were curious, intrigued, but never suspicious. I made sure of it. As I learned more about the artifact, I realized the danger I was in. The Nazis were still searching for it, their agents lurking in the shadows, their eyes always watching. I had to be careful, constantly vigilant. I learned to observe, to blend in, to become invisible. I studied the art of disguise, changing my appearance with different hairstyles, clothing, and makeup. I learned to walk with purpose, to avoid eye contact, to disappear into the crowd. I started frequenting cafes and public spaces, eavesdropping on conversations, gathering information. I learned to read body language, to spot inconsistencies, to detect lies. I became a self-taught spy, using my wits and my intuition to stay one step ahead of my pursuers. One afternoon, while sitting in a crowded cafe, I overheard two men speaking in hushed tones. They were discussing a planned attack on a local factory, a vital supplier for the Allied forces. I couldn't believe my ears. I quickly scribbled down the details on a napkin, careful not to attract attention. Using the artifact, I deciphered their coded message, confirming the attack and revealing the exact date and time. I knew I had to act. I contacted a trusted friend, a journalist who had helped Elias in the past. I gave him the information, urging him to pass it on to the authorities. He was skeptical at first, but when he saw the evidence I had gathered, he understood the gravity of the situation. The attack was thwarted, thanks to the information I had provided. I felt a surge of pride, a sense of accomplishment. I was making a difference, using Elias's legacy to fight back against the darkness. But my victory was short-lived. A few days later, I noticed a man watching me from across the street. He was tall, with a sharp, angular face and cold, calculating eyes. He wore a dark coat and a fedora, the classic uniform of a Nazi agent. He had been following me for days, I realized, subtly, almost imperceptibly. But I had noticed him. My instincts were sharp, honed by months of living in the shadows. I knew I had to move, to disappear again. They were closing in. The city, once a safe haven, had become a trap. I packed my bag, gathered Elias's diary and the artifact, and prepared to flee. As I left my apartment, I glanced back one last time. The man was still there, watching. He knew I was leaving. He would be coming after me. The loneliness was the hardest part. I missed Elias terribly. I missed his warmth, his laughter, his gentle touch. I missed our quiet evenings together, reading by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. Now I was alone, surrounded by strangers, living a life of constant fear and uncertainty. The weight of the secret I carried, the burden of Elias's legacy, was almost unbearable. But I couldn't give up. I had to keep going for Elias, for myself, for the future. I had to protect the artifact, to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. I had to honor the promise I had made him, the promise to fight for what was right, even in the face of overwhelming odds. I knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with danger and uncertainty. But I was no longer the naive young woman who had left Willow Creek. I had changed, hardened, become stronger. I was a survivor, a guardian, a warrior. I was Aurora, and I would not be defeated. The grief was still there, a dull ache in my heart, but it was tempered by a fierce determination, a burning desire to avenge Elias's death and to protect the world from the darkness that threatened to consume it. And I knew, deep down, that Elias was with me, guiding me, watching over me, every step of the way. The artifact, cold metal in my hand, felt like a silent promise, a connection to the man I loved, and a reminder of the duty I now carried. It was time to run again, but this time I would be running towards something, not just away. I was running towards a future where the truth could finally be revealed and the darkness could be defeated. And I would not rest until that day arrived. The little music box, nestled amongst my keepsakes, always held a certain magic. It wasn't just the tinkling melody it played, a fragile waltz that seemed to sigh with forgotten memories. It was what it contained, Grandma Aurora's diary, and the strange, smooth stone she called her Whispering Heart. I understood now, after reading her words, that the music box was more than a container. It was a sanctuary, a place where love, loss, and unimaginable courage could rest. Her entries during the war's final years were a whirlwind of coded messages, frantic calculations, and whispered hopes. The Whispering Heart, I learned, was instrumental in disrupting enemy communications. Aurora had discovered a resonance within the stone, a way to subtly alter radio frequencies, throwing off their timing, scrambling their messages, and planting seeds of misinformation. She worked tirelessly, a ghost in the machine, her small cottage a clandestine hub buzzing with unseen energy. She wrote of sleepless nights, fueled by strong coffee and the burning desire to see Elias again, to see the war end. One entry detailed a particularly tense operation. The Germans were planning a major offensive, one that could have turned the tide of the war. Aurora, using the Whispering Heart, managed to intercept and subtly alter the coordinates they were using for troop movements. The result was a disastrous miscalculation on their part, leading to a significant Allied victory. She described the moment she received confirmation of the success, a single, flickering light from a passing plane, as a moment of profound relief, but also one tinged with guilt. She was playing God, she wrote, manipulating events with powers she barely understood. The weight of responsibility was crushing, even as she knew she was saving lives. Another entry spoke of intercepting a message destined for a U-boat, detailing the planned sinking of a convoy carrying vital supplies. Aurora, working against the clock, managed to relay the information to Allied forces, who were able to intercept and protect the convoy. The diary entry ended with a simple sentence: "Tonight, I saved lives." But at what cost? The cost, I realized, was the constant fear, the unwavering vigilance, the knowledge that one mistake could have devastating consequences. As the war raged on, Aurora's writing became increasingly fragmented, filled with vivid descriptions of the horrors she could only imagine, painted in the stark language of intercepted messages. She wrote of bombed-out cities, of starving refugees, of young men dying in muddy trenches. The Whispering Heart had become a window into the darkest corners of humanity, and the weight of it was visibly taking its toll. Yet she persevered, driven by her love for Elias and her unwavering belief in the power of good. Then, finally, came the entry I had been waiting for, the day the war ended. The entry was short, almost anticlimactic. "The bells are ringing," she wrote. "They say it's over. It's finally over." There was no joy in her words, only a profound sense of exhaustion, of disbelief. The entry ended with a single, poignant question: what now? The following entries were sparse, detailing her journey back to Willow Creek. She found the village changed, scarred by the war, but still resilient. Many had lost loved ones, and the community was struggling to rebuild. Aurora, carrying the weight of her own experiences, knew she couldn't simply return to her old life. She had seen too much, felt too much. Instead, she dedicated herself to healing. She volunteered at the local hospital, tending to the wounded and comforting the grieving. She helped rebuild homes, taught children, and listened to the stories of those who had suffered. The Whispering Heart remained tucked away in the music box, its power dormant, its purpose fulfilled. She never spoke of her wartime activities, not even to her closest friends. The secrets she carried were hers alone, a burden she bore with quiet dignity. But the war had changed her, forging her into the woman I knew, Grandma Aurora, the woman with the gentle smile and the knowing eyes. She started a small lending library in the village, filled with books she had collected over the years. She believed in the power of education, in the ability of stories to heal and inspire. She taught children to read, to write, to dream. She encouraged them to learn from the past, but not to be defined by it. She also became a skilled gardener, transforming her small cottage garden into a vibrant oasis of color and life. She grew herbs and vegetables, sharing her bounty with her neighbors. She found solace in the simple act of nurturing, of coaxing life from the earth. Her garden became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even after the darkest of winters, spring would always return. One day, a letter arrived. It was from the War Office, requesting her presence for a debriefing. She hesitated, unsure whether to reveal her secrets. But in the end, she knew she had a responsibility to share her knowledge, to help prevent future conflicts. She traveled to London, where she was questioned extensively about her wartime activities. She revealed the existence of the Whispering Heart, demonstrating its capabilities to astonished officials. The government offered her a position, a chance to continue her work in the field of communications intelligence. But Aurora declined. She had seen enough of war, enough of secrets and lies. She wanted no part in it anymore. She wanted to return to Willow Creek, to her garden, to her books, to the quiet life she had built. And so she did. She returned to Willow Creek, where she continued to live a life of purpose and meaning. She never forgot Elias, never forgot the sacrifices she had made. But she also learned to embrace the present, to find joy in the simple things, to cherish the love of her friends and family. The Whispering Heart remained in the music box, a silent reminder of her extraordinary past. She showed it to me once, when I was a little girl. She told me it was a magic stone, a stone that could whisper secrets. But she also warned me that secrets could be dangerous, that they could weigh you down and consume you. She told me to always be honest, to always speak my truth, to always use my voice for good. Looking back, I realized that Grandma Aurora was more than just a grandmother. She was a hero, a survivor, a beacon of hope. She was a woman who had faced unimaginable challenges and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. The diary, the music box, the Whispering Heart, they were all symbols of her journey, of her love, of her sacrifice. They were reminders that even in the darkest of times, hope can still bloom, and that even the smallest of actions can have a profound impact on the world. The TikTok video my grandkids made, the one where I accidentally showed the music box and mentioned Grandma Aurora's secret life, it wasn't just a viral sensation. It was a catalyst. It brought her story to light, not in a sensationalized way, but in a way that honored her memory and her quiet heroism. People were touched by her story, inspired by her courage, and moved by her love for Elias. And me? I finally understood the depth of the woman I knew as Grandma Aurora. I understood the sacrifices she had made, the burdens she had carried. I understood why she always seemed to have a knowing smile, a quiet strength, a profound sense of peace. She had lived a life of extraordinary purpose, a life of hidden heroism. And now her story was finally being told. And in telling it, I felt closer to her than ever before. The music box, with its fragile waltz and its secret contents, was no longer just a keepsake. It was a legacy, a testament to the enduring power of love, courage, and hope. And I, her granddaughter, was now its keeper. It was my duty to ensure that her story, her whispers, were never forgotten. The TikTok video went viral, all right. A bunch of old folks, myself included, doing a silly dance. My grandkids thought it was hilarious, a good-natured ribbing about my tech ineptitude. But the truth was, that little digital escapade was a mere blip compared to the real earthquake rumbling beneath my feet. The diary. Aurora's diary. It sat on my bedside table now, no longer a mysterious artifact, but a worn, leather-bound heart laid bare. I picked it up again, the cool leather comforting in my hand. The scent of aged paper and dried lavender clung to it, a faint echo of Aurora herself. I ran my fingers over the embossed floral design, each petal and leaf a tiny, silent testament to her artistry. It wasn't just a book, it was a portal. A portal not just to the past, but to the very soul of the woman I thought I knew so well. Before, I'd seen the diary as a collection of stories, secrets whispered across time. Now, after reading every word, every carefully inked line, I understood it was so much more. It was a map. A map to the inner landscape of Aurora, a landscape filled with both sunshine and shadow, with resilience and quiet despair, with dreams realized and dreams deferred. It revealed her not as a static figure, a grandmother enshrined in sepia tones, but as a vibrant, complex human being navigating the turbulent waters of her own life. I thought of the stories she used to tell us, the fairy tales spun from thin air, the simple narratives that filled our childhood with wonder. The princess trapped in the tower, waiting for rescue. The little bird who flew across vast oceans, carrying messages of hope. The old woman who lived in the woods, dispensing wisdom and strange, potent remedies. As children, we'd listened wide-eyed, captivated by the magic. Now, I saw them for what they truly were, allegories. Metaphors for Aurora's own life, her own struggles, her own triumphs. The princess wasn't just a princess, she was Aurora, imprisoned by societal expectations, by the constraints of her time. The little bird was her spirit, soaring above adversity, carrying love and hope to those around her. And the old woman in the woods? That was Aurora, too, drawing on her inner strength, her deep well of knowledge, to heal and guide. The stories weren't just entertainment, they were coded messages, fragments of her soul woven into tales that we, her grandchildren, could understand, even if only subconsciously. She wasn't just telling us stories, she was teaching us how to survive, how to find our own strength, how to navigate the complexities of the world. She was imparting wisdom in the only way she knew how, disguising hard truths in the cloak of fantasy. Her legacy wasn't hidden in some secret compartment, some dusty artifact waiting to be discovered. It wasn't about unearthing hidden treasures or scandalous affairs. Her legacy was in the stories she told, the love she gave, the quiet strength she displayed in the face of adversity. It was in the way she nurtured us, the way she listened without judgment, the way she always made us feel safe and cherished. It was in the small acts of kindness, the gentle words of encouragement, the unwavering belief in our potential. I remember her hands, always busy, always creating. Knitting needles clicking, a wooden spoon stirring a simmering pot, a paintbrush gliding across a canvas. Those hands were the embodiment of her life, constantly shaping, molding, transforming the world around her. And now, those same hands had filled this diary, pouring out her heart onto its pages, leaving behind a testament to her resilience, her creativity, her love. Reading her words, I felt a profound connection to her, a sense of shared experience that transcended time and circumstance. Her struggles with loss, with loneliness, with the challenges of raising a family, they resonated with my own experiences, my own battles. I saw myself reflected in her words, a mirror image across generations. And in that reflection, I found a newfound strength, a renewed sense of purpose. If she could endure, if she could find joy and meaning in the face of such hardship, then so could I. The diary wasn't just a historical document, it was a lifeline. It was a reminder that we are all connected, that we all carry within us the stories of those who came before us. And that those stories, those experiences, shape who we are, who we become. Aurora's story wasn't just her own, it was part of my story, part of my children's story, part of the ongoing narrative of our family. I thought of my own children, my own grandchildren. What stories would they tell? What legacies would they leave behind? Would they know the strength of their ancestors, the sacrifices that were made to pave the way for their lives? Would they understand the importance of honoring the past, of learning from those who came before? I realized that it was my responsibility to ensure that they did. It was my responsibility to keep Aurora's story alive, to share her wisdom, to pass on her legacy of love and resilience. The diary was a precious gift, but it was also a call to action. It was a reminder that we all have stories to tell, and that those stories deserve to be heard. The weight of the diary felt different now. It was no longer a burden of unanswered questions, but a source of profound comfort. It was a tangible link to the past, a reminder of the enduring power of love, courage, and wisdom. I closed my eyes, inhaling the faint scent of lavender, and whispered a silent thank you to Aurora. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for showing me the way. Thank you for reminding me that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room. The light illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny, shimmering memory. I opened my eyes and looked around, seeing my own life in a new light. The photographs on the wall, the books on the shelves, the worn furniture, they were all testaments to a life well lived, a life filled with love, laughter, and loss. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep within my bones, that Aurora's story would continue to resonate long after I was gone. It would be whispered from generation to generation, reminder of the enduring power of the human spirit. And that, I realized, was her true legacy. Not secrets, not scandals, but the quiet strength, the unwavering love, the profound wisdom that she had shared with the world. I placed the diary back on the bedside table, carefully positioning it so that the floral design faced me. It was no longer just a book. It was a companion, a confidant, a guide. And as I drifted off to sleep, I dreamed of Aurora, her face radiant with joy, her eyes twinkling with mischief. She was no longer a figure from the past, but a living presence, a guiding light, a constant source of inspiration. And I knew, with a deep and abiding certainty, that her story would continue to inspire me, to guide me, to shape me for the rest of my days. It was a story of resilience, of courage, of love. And it was a story that deserved to be told, again and again, for generations to come. The TikTok video might have been a fleeting moment of internet fame, but Aurora's diary, that was a timeless treasure, a gift that would continue to give for as long as there were hearts to hear its message. The message that even in the face of adversity, even in the darkest of times, love, hope, and wisdom can endure. And that is a legacy worth cherishing. Here it is, my dears, Aurora's story, a whisper from the past turned into a vibrant echo, is a testament to the quiet heroism woven into the fabric of everyday life. It's a reminder that courage isn't always about grand gestures or public pronouncements. Sometimes, it's about the unwavering love in a mother's eyes, the resilience in a wife's heart, or the silent strength in a woman who chooses to protect those she holds dear, even at her own expense. Her hidden diary, those fragile pages filled with longing and sacrifice, laughter and tears, unveiled a life lived fully, a life that rippled with purpose, even when shrouded in shadows. It speaks of a time when societal expectations pressed down like heavy stones, and yet, within that pressure, a diamond of unwavering spirit emerged. Aurora's journey wasn't paved with ease. She navigated treacherous currents of loss, battled societal constraints that sought to confine her spirit, and faced betrayals that would have crumbled lesser souls. But through it all, she held fast to her inner compass, guided by the unwavering stars of love and hope. She chose to nurture, to protect, to build, even when the world around her seemed determined to tear down. She exemplified the power of quiet determination, the profound impact of small acts of kindness, and the enduring strength of a woman's heart. The stories she kept hidden, the emotions she carefully guarded, weren't born of shame or regret, but from a deep-seated desire to shield those she loved from pain. She bore burdens silently, carrying the weight of secrets that could have shattered her family, choosing instead to absorb the impact herself. This wasn't weakness, it was a profound act of love, a testament to her unwavering commitment to the well-being of her children and her husband. It's a love that transcends time, a love that resonates even now, decades after she penned those words in her diary. If Aurora's story has touched your heart, if it has stirred something within you, then it has achieved its purpose. Her life, once a secret whispered only within the pages of a worn diary, now lives on through each of you who have listened, who have felt, who have understood the depth of her sacrifice and the beauty of her enduring spirit. Stories like hers, the stories of ordinary people living extraordinary lives, are the threads that weave the rich tapestry of our shared human experience. They connect us to the past, illuminate the present, and offer hope for the future. They remind us that even in the face of adversity, love, courage, and resilience can triumph. And it is through sharing these stories, through keeping these memories alive, that we honor those who came before us, those who paved the way for us to live more freely, to love more openly, and to embrace our own individual truths. Aurora's legacy is not just in the pages of her diary, it's in the ripple effect of her actions, in the love she poured into her family, and in the inspiration she offers to us all. It is a reminder that even the smallest life can have a profound impact, that even the quietest voice can be heard across generations. Think of the secrets she held close, the dreams she nurtured in the silence of her heart. Consider the sacrifices she made, not for recognition or reward, but simply out of love. And remember, my dears, that each of us carries within us the potential for that same kind of quiet heroism, that same unwavering commitment to love and hope. Now, I want you to think about the women in your own lives, your mothers, your grandmothers, your sisters, your friends. What stories do they hold within them? What sacrifices have they made? What lessons have they learned? Take a moment to appreciate the strength and resilience that reside within them, the quiet acts of love that often go unnoticed. Aurora's story is a call to remember, to honor, and to connect. It's an invitation to delve deeper into our own family histories, to uncover the hidden stories that shape who we are, and to appreciate the sacrifices made by those who came before us. It's a reminder that we are all connected, that we are all part of a larger narrative, and that each of our lives has meaning and purpose. Please, if Aurora's story resonated with you, if it touched your heart in some way, leave a like. Let us know that her life, her struggles, her triumphs, have not been forgotten. Let us know that her voice, once confined to the pages of a diary, is now echoing across the world, inspiring others to live with courage, love, and resilience. A simple click shows that you understand the power of remembrance and the importance of sharing these heartfelt tales. And if you're eager to hear more stories like Aurora's, stories that celebrate the human spirit and remind us of the power of love, subscribe to our channel. We are committed to bringing you more tales of ordinary people living extraordinary lives, stories that will inspire, uplift, and connect you to the shared human experience. New stories are waiting to be told, waiting to be heard, and we would be honored to share them with you. But most importantly, my dears, share your thoughts. What resonated most deeply with you in Aurora's story? What did you learn from her experiences? What secret do you believe Grandma Aurora held closest to her heart, the one she never wrote down, but lived every single day? Share your reflections in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can connect, share, and honor the stories of those who came before us. Let's keep Aurora's legacy alive by discussing the lessons she taught us, the love she embodied, and the courage she displayed. Because in the end, my dears, stories are all we have. They're the threads that connect us to the past, the light that illuminates the present, and the hope that guides us towards the future. They are the way we make sense of the world, the way we connect with each other, and the way we pass on our values and beliefs to future generations. And Aurora's story, a simple story of a woman who lived, loved, and sacrificed, is a story worth remembering, a story worth sharing, and a story that will continue to inspire for years to come. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And thank you for keeping Aurora's memory alive. May her story continue to inspire you to live a life filled with courage, love, and resilience.